It all started a couple years ago when a guy named Jordin Neely would dance in public for money. He would often dance like Michael Jackson and do a dance called the moonwalk. But I want to repeat myself. This was how he used to act years ago, and it is not telling of how he still acts today. A few months after dancing in public, Jordin would soon become addicted with hardcore drugs and garner 42 arrests, and up until his death, have an active warrant out for his arrest. What we saw on Monday, May 1st, was a person that was in distress. He would frequently go to the subway and try to push people on the train tracks. He never said why he did this, but he just did it anyway. He would then go into the subway and yell, "I don't care if I die. I don't care anymore." Because he was saying things like this, and he was threatening people on the train, an ex-Marine that was present tried to get a hold of Jordin before anything happened to the fellow passengers. So, a guy named Daniel Penny and two other people tried to make Jordin unconscious until the police got there to arrest him. But since Jordin was on heavy drugs, when he went unconscious, he ended up passing away. Now, before we get into the videos, citizen's arrest is fully legal in the United States. Now let's dig into this video frame by frame. Okay, so what we're seeing here is him trying to do the move that he gets the person unconscious until the police get here. Now, of course, we can see that two other guys are with Daniel, and it's not, I mean, it's a bad situation to actually see in person, and it's a bad situation to actually see in real life. But also at the same exact time, would we rather this person be unconscious for the short amount of time if this move actually went correctly, or would we rather have people actually be threatened on the subway in New York? We're having this conversation right now because of the fact that crime in New York is so rampant that this is something that we come to expect on the subway in New York City. But actually, you can see that he's not trying to actually kill him. I mean, every single intent that these people have is just make him unconscious, which is having Jordin unconscious until the police actually get there, so everybody else can feel a little bit more safe, knowing there's not a person threatening them. That's nice, yo. Okay, so you can see right here when the camera actually changes, you can see that these people are just checking up on him, and they're actually still thinking that he's going to just be unconscious for the short amount of time. And this is him telling the rest of the people on the train that he's just unconscious, he's going to be fine. And he even says he's gonna be all right. It's okay. We'll just wait for the police to get here. So, I mean, yeah, people are going to try to make this about a race-based thing, but actually, in reality, what really happened was that this person was suffering mentally. Obviously, Jordin Neely was suffering very, very bad with hardcore drugs that he got himself into. And it's a very bad situation that New York is going to have to still deal with this crime even after the situation comes and goes. It's very sad that they couldn't resuscitate him, but when you go on so many drugs, something's bound to happen to you that you didn't expect because you're putting so much toxins into your body that you never know what's going to come of the next day. That's what's so upsetting about this situation. Now, if it was just a situation, then it would be okay. Now this is something that is very, very sad, obviously. But if it was just this situation as like if it was a situation by itself, then it would be something different. But right now, they're trying to turn it into a race-based thing because, like you all can see in the weather right now, we're having summer. Now, what does summer mean? Summer means that people have more time to themselves, which means that they would like to go outside and loot and riot. Antifa needs something else to focus on, and this is the situation that they're going to be focusing on this time, this summer, this year. So what they're going to start doing is they're going to start making him the target. They're going to try to make him the victim. They're going to try to make him, well, Daniel the target and Jordin the victim. And they're going to say, wait a second, it's white on black. Oh my God, wait a second. Oh, we need to start having all the media portray him in such a good light. Look, over here, ABC News. Jordin Neely struggled with not being able to help his mother before his murder, attorney says. Don Mills, an attorney for Nelly's family, said Neely had demons as a result of his mother's murder, and his family was trying to get him help. But the help never arrived. Instead, he wanted to threaten passengers on a New York City subway train. With this being said, we can actually see protesters start gathering inside of a subway system with this video here. So we can see that they're all over the train tracks.
Outrage surrounding the chokehold death of 30-year-old Jordin Neely. Demonstrators demanding justice and calling for criminal charges.
Of course. So they're already saying, nope, there is no innocent until proven guilty. There's only guilty until proven innocent. Now, Daniel's going to have to prove his innocence in court because the court is not going to be a free and just jury of your peers. It's going to be everybody that's indoctrinated from these protesters. Now, you can see in this CNN article now, Jordin Neely's death. We all played a role in Jordin Neely's death on a subway train. Now, I'm going to just read the first couple of paragraphs because it's the most stupid thing you've ever heard. A few weeks ago, I bought a black homeless man a chicken sandwich and a drink. I was on 8th Avenue, just a couple blocks away from Madison Square Garden, when I saw him holding the door open to the fast food restaurant. He made it clear, not with his words, but with a quiet nod, he was hoping that one of the entering customers would buy him something to eat. So I did. I didn't know what that chicken sandwich did for the man. For me, I felt as though my efforts amounted to a drop in the basket. I wanted to see him, treat him with a complex human being he is, a man made in God's image, just as I have been made in God's image. But instead of walking away, not sure whether I have bettered us both, I felt ethically important, knowing that I alone couldn't lift him into a better life, and morally bankrupt, knowing that I had the resources to offer more than just a chicken sandwich and a drink. Truth be told, I don't know why I brought him the chicken sandwich. A sense of duty? He caught me in the grief-giving mood. Truth be told, more fully, when I intentionally saw him, I considered finding another restaurant, not wanting to be disturbed by his existence. It was one of many encounters I had with the homeless. I remembered when I heard what happened to Jordin Neely, a 30-year-old homeless black man who was a well-known Michael Jackson impersonator in New York. Now, these couple of paragraphs are just setting the scene that CNN would love, and MSNBC and all of the left-wing organizations would love to play right now, because that's setting the scene for the riots and the protests happening, because that's a white on black, making race a thing. Race is not a thing in real life. Nobody is going and hunting down black people. It's not happening. If you want to see what is actually happening, we can actually see the statistics from the FBI, knowing all of this. And the FBI is something that I would like to consider a reliable source. And I don't know if you'd like to consider the FBI, which is the Federal Bureau of Investigations, a reliable source. But I mean, if you don't, you're stupid. But if you do, then I would like to mention that the FBI actually cites that black people actually target white people on a greater statistic than the opposite. And black people are contributing to the most crime on a per capita than white people are. So how come we have this statistic from the FBI, but everybody likes to ignore these facts? Because of the fact that people don't like the facts. People think that the facts hurt their feelings. If you think that the facts hurt your feelings, then you're a manipulated person from the mainstream media, and you need to get some serious help, because you're not living in the reality that we all are living in. You're living in your made-up fantasy land. Now, with the last article that we're going to have. It's ABC. Police seek trespassers on subway tracks in protest of Jordin Neely's death. Exactly what I said. Manhattan, a handful of protesters of Jordin Neely's death are being sought by police for jumping onto the subway tracks and disturbing service over the weekend. So, of course, this is exactly what people wanted to do the whole entire time. They just wanted an excuse to go out, loot, protest, and riot. That's the only reason why this situation is actually forced down our throats in the same way that the George Floyd situation was forced down our throat a couple years ago. And this is a very, very upsetting thing because of the fact that we can't just live 1 year without something being so mainstream mediaized to get people angry and to start having people feel emotions that they cannot control. And then they go out and they punch somebody, and they go out and they kill hundreds of people, and they go out and burn buildings down, and they go and spit in people's faces that are just eating. These are exactly the things that these people in the mainstream media want to happen because they love the media about it. They love the media around the situations, and then they love causing the situations that cause them to have more media coverage for themselves. So that's exactly what's happening here, and it's very, very upsetting, and it's very, very sad. So I laughed so I don't cry. With that being said, we're going to be moving into the regularly scheduled Demetrius's show episode.
Facts over tracks, isn't that spitting slow, spitting fast, I could roast, I could gas, think I'm okay at last, but I don't know if that can erase all the past.
The Biden administration just held a yearly event where they make ass kissing look normal. This event they held is called the White House Correspondents' Dinner, and this is where media personnel go to the White House for a dinner. But this year, instead of getting a dinner, what they got was a very cringy experience. What they also got was an old man trying to speak and failing at it, while at the same time lying to the camera through his dentures. Also in the news, we have Utah banning websites from showing porn to minors, so instead of coming out with a verification service, Pornhub, the nation's largest porn website, suspends website access to Utah. This shows that Pornhub doesn't even see it being worth it to even try to operate under these conditions, and would rather give up entirely. While at the same time, immigration is going to get even worse when Title 42 ends. If you don't know what Title 42 is, we're going to dig into that on today's episode of The Demetrius Araujo Show. Today, the average age that people watch porn is 12 years old. This is because devices are so commonly used now that children have free and unwitting access without verification. That's why we need state governments to take drastic action and make laws that say this is a problem. That's what Utah said, not expecting the nation's largest porn website to up and leave. But with Pornhub restricting access to its website within the state, it now paints a bigger and clearer picture of what the true reason why they left is. Libertarians don't like this new law because it uses the heavy hand of the government to crack down on businesses trying to expose minors to hardcore porn. This couldn't be a more wrong take because we have laws preventing anyone under the age of 21 to buy a pack of cigarettes or kids under the age of 21 buying alcohol. And yes, even though this law isn't perfect, there's still advantages of having the law on the books anyway. If we look at the average age that people started drinking here in the United States, it would be 16 years old. So let me get this straight. Something that rewires your brain and changes the way that you are attracted to people is more common than a margarita. Let me restate. We in the United States would rather have laws on the books to stop children from having fireballs than stopping them from accessing something that will damage the way they look at relationships forever. We can tell why Pornhub is doing this, and I hope that a lot more people open their eyes to the disaster of the company that preys on children to perform well monetarily. Or with that being said, we're going to be digging into the headlines of the week. So starting right from the top, we're going to have a highlight reel of Joe Biden's most, I would say, embarrassing moments in this event.
Unlike last year, Brittany Griner's here with her wife, Cheryl. Brittany, where are you, kid? Stand up, come on. I love this woman. This is not your father's press from 20 years ago. No, I'm serious, and you all know it better than I do. But still, it is absolutely consequential and essential. After all, I believe in the First Amendment, not just because my good friend Jimmy Madison wrote it. In a lot of ways, this dinner sums up my first 2 years in office. I'll talk for 10 minutes, take 0 questions, and cheerfully walk away. Yeah, I know, I just announced my re-election campaign. I get that age is a completely reasonable issue. It's on everybody's mind. And everyone, by everyone I mean the New York Times. Headline, Biden. You might think I don't like Rupert Murdoch. That's simply not true. How could I dislike a guy who makes me look like Harry Styles? You call me old. I call it being seasoned. You say I'm ancient. I say I'm wise. You say I'm over the hill. Don Lemon would say that's a man in his prime. I love NPR. Because they whisper into the mic like I do. But the job isn't finished. I mean, it is finished for Tucker Carlson. Had Ron DeSantis, I had a lot of Ron DeSantis jokes ready. But Mickey Mouse beat the hell out of me, got there first. After his re-election as governor, he was asked if he had a mandate. He said, hell no, I'm straight. Look, y'all keep reporting my approval ratings is 42%. But I think you don't know this. Kevin McCarthy called me and asked me, Joe, what the hell's your secret? I go where people are, The Daily Show. Roy's a great guy. He once dubbed me the Jay-Z of Delaware. Don't let that look in your face, you did. Tonight he asked me to keep it short. Even offered me $10 if I'd keep it under 10 minutes. That's a switch, a president being offered hush money.
Yes, these are all very, very, very bad clips of Joe Biden because of the fact that Joe Biden is old and he doesn't even know what the heck he's saying. With that being said, we're going to be digging into the next headline of the week, and we actually have the evidence to support a medicalized. Okay, so we have an article from The Economist. We have the evidence to support medicalized gender transitions in adolescence is worryingly weak. The effectiveness and side effects of the most common treatments are not well understood. Prisha Mosley was 17 when she first was given testosterone in a clinic in North Carolina after she had declared to her parents that she was a boy. She had struggled through her teen years with anorexia and depression after a sexual assault. Luke Hen had both breasts removed as a 16-year-old in Nebraska. Chloe Cole in California was a year younger when she had her double mastectomy. She had been on testosterone and puberty-blocking drugs since 13, also after a sexual assault. All 3 girls were experiencing gender dysphoria, a feeling of intense discomfort with their own sexed bodies. Once a rare diagnosis, it has exploded over the past decade. In England and Wales, the number of teenagers seeking treatment at the Gender Identity Development Service, GIDS, the main clinic treating dysphoria, has risen 17-fold since 2011 to 2012. See Chart 1. So if we looked at Gender JAIR, Britain referrals to Tavistock Gender Identity Clinic, we can see in 2011 it was almost 0%. But then right at, I would say 2016, boom, it skyrocketed above 1,000. And then now in 2022, nearly about 11 years later, it's above 3,000. So that's crazy. Commando, a health technology firm, estimated that more than 42,000 American children and teenagers were diagnosed in 2021, 3 times the count in 2017. Other rich countries, from Australia and to Sweden, have also experienced rapid increases. As the caseload has grown, so has the method of treatment. Pioneered in the Netherlands, now known as gender affirming care, it involves acknowledging parents' feelings about a mismatch between their body and the sense of self, and after psychological assessment, offering some of them a combination of puberty blocking drugs, opposite sex hormones, and sometimes surgery to try to ease their discomfort. Commando's data suggests around 5,000 teenagers were prescribed puberty blockers or cross-sex hormones in America in 2021, double the number in 2017. Dysphoria for the treatment is controversial in many countries, but in America, most of all, it had become yet another front in the cultural wars. Many on the left cultivate critics of gender-affirming care are all as curiously discarding extreme distress and even suicides among adolescents with gender dysphoria and their determination to ease trans peoples. Zealots on the right, meanwhile, accuse doctors of being so hell-bent on promoting gender transitions that they groom vulnerable teenagers, a term usually applied to pedophiles. In October, supporters of critics of gender-affirming care held rival Trouty protests outside a meetings of the American Academy of Pediatrics. Several American states, such as Florida and Utah, have passed laws banning gender-affirming care in children. Joe Biden, America's president, has described such laws as close to sinful. Almost all America's medical authorities support gender-affirming care, but those in Britain, Finland, France, Norway, and Sweden, while supporting taking therapy as a first step, have misgivings about the pharmaceutical and surgical elements of the treatment. A Finnish review, published in 2020, concluded that gender reassignment in children is now experimental, and the treatment should seldom proceed beyond taking therapy. Swedish authorities found that the risks of physical interventions, quote-unquote, currently outweigh the possible benefits and should only be offered in experimental cases. In Britain, a review led by Hilary Class, a pediatrician, found that gender-affirming care had developed without some of the normal quality controls that are typically applied with new or innovative treatments are introduced. In 2022, France's National Academy of Medicine advised doctors to proceed with drugs and surgery only with a great medical caution and the greatest reserve. There is no question that many children and parents are so desperate to help with gender dysphoria, some consider the physical elements of gender-affirming care to be life-saving treatments, but this is obviously wrong. But the fact that some parents are harmed is not in doubt either. Miss Mosey, Miss Hen, and Miss Cole, all detransitioners, they have changed their mind and no longer wish to be seen as male. All three bitterly regret the irreversible effects of their treatment and are angry at doctors who, they say, rushed them into it. Miss Cole considers herself to have been butchered by institutionalists we all throughout thought we could trust. The transitioning of teenagers has its roots in a treatment protocol developed in the Netherlands in the 1980s to 1990s. It is built on 3 pillars: puberty blockers, formerly known as GnHR, cross-sex hormones, and surgery. The goal was to alter the patient's body to more closely match their sense of cross-sex identity and thereby relieve their mental anguish. A pair of papers published in 2011 and 2014 by Inelu de Veris, one of Dutch protocol pioneers reported on the experiences of some of the first patients. They concluded that symptoms of depression decreased among patients taking puberty blockers, and the gender dysphoria resolved, and physiologically functioning steadily improved after cross-sex hormones and surgery. Transition ignition. Puberty blockers do what their name suggests. The idea is that suspending unwanted sexual development can give patients time to think about their dysphoria and whether or not they wish to pursue more drastic interventions. The same family of drugs is used to treat central precocious puberty, in which puberty begins very early. Some countries also use them to clinically castrate sex offenders. As with many other medicines used in children, the use of puberty blockers in gender medicine is off-label, meaning that they do not have regulatory approval for that purpose. Patients who decide to proceed with this transition are then prescribed cross-sex hormones. Males will see the development of breasts and alterations of how fat is stored in the body. Giving testosterone to females boosts muscle growth and causes irreversible changes such as deepening the voice, altering bone structure of the face, and the growth of facial hair. Under the original Dutch protocol, surgery was permitted only after a patient turned 18, although as the cases of Miss Cole and Miss Hen show, some places master commodities occur at the younger age. Male patients can have artificial breasts implanted, more elaborate procedures in which females have a stimulated penis built from a tube of skin harvested from the forearm or one's thigh, or a male can have a artificial vagina made in the penile intersection and preserved extremely rarely on minors. Well, or they say. In 2020, the National Institute of Health and Care Excellence, NICE, a British body which reviews the scientific underpinnings of medical treatments, looked at the case for puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones. The academic evidence it was found was weak, discouraging, and in some cases, contradictory. The studies suggest puberty blockers had little impact on patients. Cross-sex hormones may improve mental health, but the certainty that finding was low, and NICE warned of the unknown risks of taking lasting side effects. For both cases of drug, NICE asserted the quality of papers it analyzed as, quote, very low. Its poorest rating. Some studies reported results, but made no effort to analyze them for statistical significance. Cross-sex hormones are a lifelong treatment, yet follow-up was short, ranging from 1 to 6 years. Most studies followed only a single set of patients who were giving the drugs, instead of comparing them to another set who were not, such as a control group. Researchers cannot tell whether anything that happened to the patients in the studies was down to the drugs, to the other patients and treatments in patients might be receiving, such as counseling or antidepressants, or to some other unrelated third factor. The upshot is that it is hard to know whether any of the supported effects reported in the studies, whether positive or negative, are actually real. Reviews in Finland and Sweden came to similar conclusions. As the Swedish one put it, the scientific BR is not significant in assesses puberty inhibiting or gender opposite hormone treatment in children. Two American professional bodies, the Endocrine Society (ES) and the World Professional Association for Transgender Health (WPATH), have also reviewed the science underpinning adolescent transitions, but ES's review did not set out to look at whether gender-affirming care helped resolve gender dysphoria or improve mental health by any measure. It focused instead on side effects, for which it found only weak evidence. This submission, says Jordin Goya of McMaster University, makes the review fundamentally flawed. WPATH, for its part, did look at psychological effects of blockers or hormones. It found scant, low-quality evidence Despite these findings, both groups continue to recommend physical treatments for gender dysphoria and insist that their reviews and their resulting guidelines are sound. One justification for puberty blockers is that they buy time for children to decide whether to proceed with cross-sex hormones or not. But the data available is far from clinics suggests that almost all decide to go ahead. A Dutch paper published in October concluded that 98% of adolescents prescribed puberty blockers decided to proceed to cross-sex hormones. Similarly, high numbers have been reported elsewhere. The reassuring interperception is that blockers are being prescribed very precisely, given only to those dysphoric, is deep-rooted and unlikely to ease. The troubling one is that puberty blockers lock at least some children in the further treatment time to think. A new book about grids by a British journalist, Hannah Burns, cites British medical workers concerned by the latter possibility. They say patients received blockers after curiously and shadowing examinations. The Dutch researchers weighed both explanations. Quote, "It is likely that most people starting puberty blockers experience sustained gender dysphoria," they wrote. But, quote, "one cannot exclude the possibility that starting puberty blockers in itself makes adolescents more likely to continue medical transition. Perhaps the biggest question is how those given drugs and surgery eventually change their minds and detransition and having reconciled themselves with their biological sex. Those who do often face fresh anguish as they come to terms with their permanent and visible alterations of their bodies. Once again, good data are scarce. One problem is that those who are in a transition are likely to stop talking to their doctors, and so they disappear from figures. The estimates that do exist vary by an order of magnitude or more. Some studies have reported detransition rates as low as 1%, but 3 papers published in 2021 and 2022, one looked at patients in Britain and America armed forces, found between 7 and 30% of them stopped treatment within a few years. The original Dutch studies published in 2011 and 2014 were longitudinally. That is, they followed the same group of patients throughout their treatment. Yet, 3 recent critiques published in the Journal of Sex and Medical Therapy nonetheless found fault with these studies' data. One of the new studies' concerns is the small size of the original samples. The 2011 paper looked at 70 patients, but the outcome treatment was only known for between 32 and 55 of them. The exact number depends on the specific measure. And even then, the final assessment of outcomes occurred around 18 months after surgery, a very short time frame for a treatment whose effects will last a lifetime. The first patient, FG, was followed for longer. In 2011, when the mid-30s, researchers reported his feelings of shame about his genital appearance and of inexquisitely unsexual matters. A decade later, things had improved, and FG had a steady girlfriend. The critiques also suggest that finding the gender dysphoria improved with treatment may have an artifact of how the participants were assessed. Before treatment, female patients were asked to agree or disagree with such treatments as, quote, "Every time someone treats me as a girl, I feel hurt." That this established their desire to be seen as a male. After blockers, hormones, and surgery, and sex, same individuals were asked questions on a scale of originally developed for those born male. It offered statements such as, "Every time someone treats me as a boy, I feel hurt." Naturally, patients who prefer to be as male disagreed. In effect, the yardstick was changed in the way that they might be seen as making positive outcomes more likely. And if you do want to see the rest of this article, I would read it. I really, really recommend it. If you go to theeconomist.com and you search the evidence to support medicalized gender transitions in adolescence is worryingly weak. I'd recommend everybody go read the whole entire article because it's very, 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 very important for everybody to understand the cultural war that we're fighting today, because it's very important to protect our minors. Now, with that being said, we're going to be moving into the next article. We actually have the New York Post article. We have Dem mayors stop blaming Texas for migrant woes. It's on Biden. And I completely agree. Who would it be on? Who would it be on? Because the migrants are coming into the border because Joe Biden, while he was on the campaign trail, said, the borders are open, come, the borders are open. Okay, the borders are open, your migrants are here, and you don't want to let them in? No, you are letting them in because of the fact that just when Title 42 ends, we're going to have 3.65 million immigrants coming in every single year. That's 10,000 immigrants per day from the southern border alone. So what are we talking about here? And that's going straight into Texas. But instead of Governor Abbott sitting there and letting 10,000 immigrants come in per day when Title 42 ends, I should say, he sent 500 of them to these sanctuary cities because he's like, oh, well, if these sanctuary cities say that they can allow these immigrants, how about we send them over? So he sends it over to Minneapolis, he sends it over to Chicago, and what do they say? They say, oh my God, national state of emergency. The whole entire police station is full of migrants. All of these stations, all of these public spaces are all full of migrants. They declared a national emergency and they have no room for these migrants. But then they, instead of taking back what they said and saying, oh wait, we messed up, Joe Biden, it's your responsibility to help us with the migrant situation, they blame Governor Abbott as if he's not trying to get rid of the problem himself. It just does not make any sense. If you're trying to settle with the problem and trying to make it easier for yourself because you know for a fact you don't agree with these policies, you're trying to get rid of the immigrants, which are the problem in this situation. The immigrants are the problem. You're trying to get rid of the problem by giving it to these other cities that then go and say, no, we're going to take them in. Oh, you're so rude for not taking them in. You give them to them and, oh, how dare you give them to me? Like, can you make up your mind? Which one do you want? Do you want the immigrants? Do you not want the immigrants? Don't open your mouth if you're not ready to take on and eat your words. With that being said, let's dig into the article. Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot castigated Texas Governor Greg Abbott over his most recent plan to bus migrants out of his state. Lightfoot derides Abbott's busing plan as an inhumane and dangerous action, but her complaints are misdirected. Abbott's not to blame for the migrants who are drawing down Chicago's resources. President Biden is. Since taking office, Joe Biden has released more than 2 million southwest border immigrants. That's a population of individuals larger than 14 United States. And a figure that doesn't include nearly 1 million other gotaways, aliens who have entered illegally and evaded overwhelmed Border Patrol agents since the start of FY 2022. Texas has borne the brunt of the migrant surge. Of the 2.2 million plus apprehended by agents at the United States-Mexico line last fiscal year, an all-time record, nearly 2/3, more than 63%, were caught in one Border Patrol's 5 Texas state sectors. Last April, a small Texan town like Uvalde and Casero Springs struggled to deal with the scores of illegal border crossers who were being released daily by DHS onto their streets, and with no resources and no way out, Abbott started busing migrants north, first to Washington, D.C., and then to New York, Chicago, and other large cities. Those cities who had previously in Casero Springs struggled to deal with scores of illegal border crossers who were being released daily by DHS onto their streets, and with no resources and no way out, Abbott started busing migrants north, first to Washington, D.C., and then to New York, Chicago, and other large cities. Those cities, which had previously lauded their commitments to immigrant communities, quickly complained that they had to provide food, shelter, and medical care to those newly arrived migrants, even though they were better able to than any other border community to do so. Demands from officials in those cities for hundreds of millions of dollars in federal aid soon followed. Those demands have subsequently taken a sour turn, with Mayor Eric Adams now calling on the Federal Emergency Management Agency to stop giving money to localities for buses to send migrants to a city. Texas border cities, including El Paso and Laredo, already standing under migrant releases, have declared states of emergency in advance of the end of Title 42 on May 11th. Once Title 42 is lifted, the daily migrant flow is expected to double. Instead of blaming Abbott for those struggling border communities, Adams and Lightfoot should direct their anger at President Biden because it's non-detection policies. And instead of blaming Abbott for those struggling border communities, Adams and Lightfoot should direct their anger at President Biden because of his non-detection. Instead of blaming Abbott for those struggling border communities, Adams and Lightfoot should direct their anger at President Biden because of his non-detention policies. And those are the reason why. Instead of blaming Abbott and those struggling border communities, Adams and Lightfoot should direct their anger at President Biden because of his non-detention policies that are driving the waves of migrants across the borders and into their states and cities. That was one conclusion of the federal judge T. Kent Wetherill in his recent opinion in the case brought by the state of Florida challenging Biden's release policies, which the court found was akin to posting a flashing "come in and we're open" sign for would-be migrants. As Judge Wetterwell put it, the unprecedented surge of aliens that started arriving at the southwest border almost immediately after Biden took office, and that continued unabated over the past 2 years, was an unpredictable consequence of the administration's actions. Biden's Department of Justice hasn't appealed that decision, likely because the court was correct in its conclusions. Of course, that hasn't stopped the White House from blaming its border fiasco on the Trump administration's alleged gutting of the immigration system, a contention of as nonsensical as it's deceptive. While I can't understand that Lightfoot and Adams are frustrated at the prospect of having to spend more and more tax dollars caring for their budget-holding migrant populations, it's time for them to place the blame on their physical challenges where it belongs, not on Abbott or Texas border towns on the front lines of the disaster, but on their fellow Democrat, Joe Biden. And I completely agree. They need to start taking accountability for their actions because the policies that they put forth are very detrimental for the United States as a whole.